There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. And
really?
Yes, of course. They want it anyway. I don't think we'll win it, but that's a separate analysis. But
so Trump is the man who can save the Western world and probably the human beings in the globe as well. That's my personal conviction. So if any Western country would send any boots on the ground, that would mean a direct war between the West and Russia. And we are in a third world war immediately. So it's a very dangerous moment now.
Rzadko wrzucam 2 materiały jednego dnia, natomiast teraz wszystko tak szybko idzie, że jeśli tego dzisiaj nie zrobię, szybko nie zobaczycie tej wiadomości, to po prostu jutro będą już inne ważne rzeczy. I to, co najbardziej chcę, żebyście spojrzeli na to, co będziecie za chwilę widzieć przez jaki pryzmat, to jak szybko zmieniają się media, w jaki sposób w tej chwili już liderzy muszą kontaktować się ze światem. Właśnie również przez cenzurę i poprawność polityczną wielu polityków, wiele sił zostało wykluczonych całkowicie z mediów i okazuje się, że to niezależni internetowi w tej chwili dziennikarze, może Tucker Carlson nie jest takim zwykłym internetowym dziennikarzem, ale to właśnie w studiach internetowych podcasterów, innych osób, które zajmują się niezależnie mediami, pojawiają się już głowy państwa, dla których również stare media stały się nieadekwatne do potrzeb i tego, w jaki sposób komunikują się ludzie. Również nieadekwatne, dlatego że stare media przestały się cieszyć jakimkolwiek zaufaniem. I jeśli chcą być wiarygodni, muszą po prostu rozmawiać ze zwykłymi ludźmi i czasami nawet są to jednoosobowe firmy, jednoosobowe kanały, w których muszą pojawiać się głowy państw. To było w Polsce, to jest na świecie i to staje się bardzo, bardzo ciekawym krajobrazem medialnym, dającym dużo możliwości i może właśnie to jest moment, o którym mówiłem, że warto otworzyć projekt medialny, który również zaproponowałem w poprzednim wideo, po to, żeby catch up, żeby złapać się po prostu w te wszystkie zmiany i nie pozwolić, żeby ta przestrzeń właśnie w nowej rzeczywistości była niezagospodarowana, abyśmy nie mieli tych informacji ze świata, abyśmy nie prowadzili aktywnej takiej dyplomacji, również medialnej z innymi krajami, nie zapraszali, nie wysyłali jasnych wiadomości w świat, nie uczestniczyli w tej światowej debacie. Myślę, że jako Polska nie możemy sobie na to pozwolić. Trzeba się tego nauczyć i trzeba jak najszybciej wziąć w tym wszystkim udział. Więc zobaczcie teraz prezydenta Orbana razem z Tuckerem Carlsonem i również jego samodzielną wypowiedź Tuckera Carlsona, wyciętą z większego podcastu, na temat rychłej wojny Stanów Zjednoczonych z Rosją. Pierwszy raz tak szczerze, tak dosadnie o tym mówi. A jest to osoba bardzo dobrze połączona z tym, co się dzieje w Stanach Zjednoczonych. I ostatni filmik, który zobaczycie podczas tego wieczornego live'a, czyli takich wiadomości wieczornych, jest to świeże wideo z Afryki, gdzie doszło do nowego przewrotu i kolejne państwo zostało przejęte przez wojsko. Także mam nadzieję, że przebaczycie mi ewentualne błędy w tych nagraniach, ewentualne jakieś nieścisłości językowe, ale tak jak mówiłem, ważne jest, żeby tę informację Wam wysłać dzisiaj, bo mogą być w nocy nowe informacje, zwłaszcza, że wczoraj była sytuacja napięta w Rosji, było tam atak dronów na infrastrukturę wojskową rosyjską w głąb kontynentu, a że jesteśmy, że tak powiem, o włos od tej atomowej wojny, jak to mówi Tucker Carlson, to przynajmniej dowiedzmy się i poznajmy te perspektywy, żebyśmy wiedzieli, bo w polskiej debacie na pewno o tym nie usłyszycie. Udostępnijcie to proszę nagranie, zostawcie komentarz, wykorzystajcie te komentarze do dyskusji, podzielcie się ze znajomymi. Myślę, że warto, żeby takie informacje prosto ze świata również otrzymali. Cześć!
The Biden administration described you in the United States in the media as a fascist. Are you worried about being crushed by the United States?
It's dangerous, may I say. I'm not the favorite politicians of the liberals, unfortunately, but nobody is perfect, you know. There are certain things which are more important than me, than my ego. Family, nation, God. Liberal originally meant freedom, but now in Europe, liberal means that you are enemy of the freedom.
As the war in Ukraine completely reshuffles the world order and threatens to destroy human civilization, it's striking just how little information Americans are receiving about what happens there. The nation of Hungary shares a border with Ukraine. Its leader, Viktor Orban, the nation's longest-serving prime minister, has been dealing with the Russians all of his life. Viktor Orban understands Russia and Ukraine. So 2 years after we last spoke to him, we returned to Hungary to sit down with Prime Minister Viktor Orban and ask him what exactly is happening in Ukraine right now. Here's what he said.
So in the United States, the view is that Ukraine is winning this war. It doesn't sound like that's true.
No, it's a lie. It's not just a misunderstanding, it's a lie. It's impossible. Everybody who's in politics and understand the logic, the figures, the data, no way.
Why is it impossible?
Because that way, the poor Ukrainians die every day.
Yes.
Hundreds and thousands, you know. So my heart is with them. So it's tragedy. It's tragedy for Ukraine. But they will run out earlier from the soldiers, number of soldiers, than the Russians. What finally will count is boots on the ground. And the Russians are far stronger, far numerous, more numerous
There's more
than the
of them.
Ukrainians.
Many more.
So this strategy, what we are just supporting, is a bad engineering of the strategy.
So if the Biden administration has said our goal is to beat Russia, is to effect regime changes to kill Putin and take him out of power.
You know, they misunderstand probably the Russians. You know, to understand the Russians, it's a difficult thing, especially if you have an ocean between you and Russia. So when we speak about politics, I mean Westerners, what is the focus point of our conversation? The focus point is freedom. How to provide more and more freedom to the people.
Yes.
When you speak on politics in Russia, this is not the number one issue. The number one issue, how to keep together the country, because the country is very big. And there's a privilege of the question how to keep together the country and not freedom. Freedom is just another issue, second, third, whatever. First, keep the country together. And that's generate a different kind of culture and understanding of politics. That's create a kind of military approach like
Yes.
they have. Always on security, safety, buffer zone, geopolitical approaches. It's not our culture, it's a different approach. It's legitimate to have that because it's their history. But we have to understand that we cannot beat them as we do just now. It's impossible. They will not kill their leader. They will never give it up. They will keep together the country and they will defend it. We finance more, they will invest more. If we send more technical equipment, they will produce more. So don't misunderstand the Russians.
Given the manpower imbalance between the Russian and Ukrainian armies and the attrition of the Ukrainian army, hundreds of thousands dead.
And many Hungarians as well. Nobody knows it. But we have a minority, a strong minority, more than 150,000 people in the territory of Ukraine, which was earlier part of Hungary. So it's a historical minority community living there. They are part of the Ukrainian state, and they are conscripted now to the army. And they die. They fight for Ukraine, and Hungarians, soldiers dying for Ukraine as Ukrainian citizens. So we lost, Hungarian nation, we are losing lives daily as also.
At a certain point, they're going to need more men. They're going to need more soldiers. Where are they going to come from?
That's the most risky question. So if any Western country would send any boots on the ground, that would mean a direct war between the West and Russia. And we are in a third world war immediately. So it's a very dangerous moment now.
That's obvious to you.
Absolutely. Not for me. Everybody on the street. All the ordinary citizens are aware that we are living in a very dangerous moment. So the third world war couldn't knocking on our door. So we have to be very, very careful. And that's my message always to America as well at NATO summit. Be careful with that.
So if you were in charge of NATO, if you were, say, Joe Biden, what would your next move be in the war in Ukraine? What would you do?
Peace, immediately. Call back Trump. That's the only way out.
Call back Trump.
Call back Trump. Because, you can criticize him for many reasons. I understand all the discussion, but, the best foreign policy of the recent several decades belonged to him. He did not initiate any new war.
Yes.
He treated nicely the North Koreans and Russia, even the Chinese, He delivered a policy which was the best one for Middle East, Abraham Accords.
Yes.
So that was a very good foreign policy. He's criticized that he's not educated enough to understand the world. This is not the case. Facts count, and his foreign policy was the best one for the world. in the last several decades I have seen. And if he would have been the president at the moment of the Russian invasion started, no, it would be not possible to do that by the Russians. So Trump is the man who can save the Western world and probably the human beings in the globe as well. That's my personal conviction. We should make a deal with the Russians on the new security architecture to provide security, sovereignty for Ukraine, but not membership in NATO.
How would you approach that? What would it look like, the settlement?
First, you should admit, probably publicly acknowledging, that the key is in your hand. So if United States would like to have a peace, next morning there is a peace. Because it's obvious that the Ukrainians, the poor Ukrainians on their own, they are not competitive in this war. So if there is no money and there is no equipment from the West and especially from the United States, the war is over.
Yes.
The solution is in your hand. Is in the hand of your president. The present one or the future one. But you will solve it. The United States can do it, nobody else. It's not the solution for the Ukrainians. Of course, it's about Ukrainians. They cannot be neglected. They must be involved. But the real factor is not Ukraine. The real factor is intention of the United States.
Yes. So policymakers in the United States have been talking recently about taking Crimea, including the Russian port, away from the Russians. Is that a realistic goal, and what would happen if we tried?
It's totally unrealistic. No way.
That's not a wise.
No. It's not wise. It's not realistic. It's out of question.
You know, here's my view of it. I think the lies are unsustainable. Lying is always unsustainable. You're always found out in the end, whether in your lifetime or posthumously. But lies are always revealed by their nature. And these lies are so big and so obvious and so stupid that it's going to be very clear to the majority of voters before the election that the Biden administration has no idea what it's doing, that Joe Biden is not running the government, and that it's not working at all. And I think by that point, we're going to have a real economic contraction. I think we're going to be in the teeth of a very tough recession, and that makes everything much more intense. And so if your goal is to maintain power, and if you think once you relinquish power, the problem with criminalizing politics is the people who do it imagine or know that it will be done to them. So once you start indicting your political opponents, you know that you have to win or else they're going to indict you if they win, right?
Right.
And so they can't lose. They will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. I know everyone on the right's afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandate. They're not going to do that. They can't do that. If they've already been exposed, that won't work. There's going to be, no, what are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia is what they're going to do. But I think it's a political matter. They need to declare war footing in order to assume war powers in order to win. I believe that. And I think the evidence suggests that's true. So if you're worried about our politics getting like even more vicious than it already is, and people being hurt in our politics, which is entirely possible, you should be worried about the prospect of an open war. We're already at war with Russia, of course. We're funding their enemies. So we're fighting Russia. But I mean, an open battle with Russia where we say we're at war with Russia. I think that could easily happen. I think we could Tonkin Gulf our way into it, where all of a sudden missiles land in Poland. The Russians did it. Our NATO allies been attacked. We're going to war. I could see that happening very easily. So if you're worried about that, you need to put as much pressure as you possibly can on the Republican-held Senate to force a peace, which can be done. The United States could force a peace in Ukraine tonight. We're funding one side. There is no Ukrainian army outside of NATO. If NATO withdrew its support for Ukraine, Ukraine would crumble in a day. So we are the only power in the world that can bring both sides to the table to force a peace, which will be unsatisfactory as all forced peaces are. Like each side will give more than it wants, but that's the only option. Otherwise, I would bet my house on it. We are going to war with Russia. And of course, the stakes are everything, our life on the planet. I mean, these are the two biggest nuclear arsenals in the world facing off against each other. So like, this is insane. They're insane. These are people who think men can become women, who believe that face masks save you from COVID. I mean, these are not rational people. Would they go to war with Russia? Of course they would. Again, they want to anyway. And I don't know why Republicans don't get this at all, but they don't seem to get it. And meanwhile, Republican leaders, and Mitch McConnell's senile too, so I don't even blame him, but all the stupid Republican senators and McCarthy in the House. I mean, it's pathetic. These people are all on board with the war against Russia. Why?
Well, I think it may even be scarier because you say they believe masks work or they believe men can become women and so on and so forth. I don't know that they believe that. I think it may be worse. I think they can say or do anything to hang on to power.
Their view of Russia is very, and I can say this as someone who was, against the Soviets when it mattered, when they existed. But I'm maybe the only person in the United States who doesn't really have very strong feelings about Russia. I'm not that interested in Russia. I don't see it as our enemy or ally. I just don't have strong emotions about Russia. So I look at this and I see true hysteria. Like they've convinced themselves that our global enemy is Russia. And I really think they mean that. And certainly the Republicans mean it. The Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, the low IQ wing of the Republican Party, which is most of the Republican Party, is low IQ at the leadership level. They all think that and they mean it. And like someone needs to slap them awake. You're leading this country to its destruction. We've already lost control of the world. The American empire's in free fall right now, and we're going to lose the US dollar. And when that happens, we're going to have real poverty here, like Great Depression level poverty. And it comes from this war. And I don't understand why no one else can see this, but it's super obvious once you leave. Spend a week in Europe and talk to smart people on both sides. Like, it doesn't matter what their politics are, and ask them, like, what effect do you think the war in Ukraine has had on American leadership in Europe? Dude. And by the way, Western Europe is our only reliable ally in the world. We only have one real ally, and that's Western Europe. And Western Europe is being destroyed by this. The German economy was crushed when the Biden administration blew up Nord Stream. I know nobody cares, but if you think like long term about this, they're really kicking the legs out from under this country in a way that is not possible to repair, at least in the short term.
Former French colony, this time Gabon. The country's military has deposed the newly re-elected president and say he's been placed under house arrest, while his son has been arrested for, quote, treason and corruption.
It is brought to the attention of the national and international community that Mr. Ali Bongo Ondimba is being kept under house arrest. He's surrounded by his family and his doctors.
Well, the military leaders also shared a list of people who've been arrested for alleged large-scale fraud of public funds and who they claim organised international financial embezzlement and other charges. Regional journalist Timothy Obezu can take us through what has been unfolding on a busy day in the Central African nation.
Basically, in Gabon, there was the presidential election that happened over the weekend. And early hours Wednesday, we saw the Gabon, the State Electoral Commission, or the State Electoral Body, declared incumbent leader, President Ali Bongo, as the winner of that election. And that would mean he is returning for a third term. But just shortly after that announcement, we saw a group of senior military officers, make a national broadcast or a televised broadcast on Gabon 24. And that broadcast was delivered in French.
We, the Defence and Security Forces, gathered within the Committee for the Transition and the Restoration of Institutions on behalf of the Gabonese people and guarantors of the protection of the institutions have decided to defend peace by ending the regime in place. For this purpose, the general elections of August the 26th, 2023, and its results are cancelled. All institutions are dissolved, including government institutions, the Senate, the National Assembly, the Constitutional Court. We call on the population, the community of the brotherly country settled in Gabon, as well as the Gabonese diaspora, to remain calm. We will reaffirm our stance to respect Gabon's commitment to the national and international communities.
Basically, we're looking at another coup in Africa. And apart from the problem with the credibility of the election that was cited by the military leaders there, the military leaders also said in French that, they highlighted serious institutional, political, economic, and social factors or crises as part of the reason why they have taken that step. Already, there are videos on social media suggesting that these military leaders, again, like what we saw in Niger, might be seen or might be getting the support of the local people there.
Well, we have received this exclusive footage from Gabon showing vast crowds of people celebrating the military takeover. As you can see, those military vehicles going through the crowds to claps and applause as well, as has been happening throughout the day. As clearly appears here, the overthrow looks to have the backing of many people in Gabon, with citizens greeting those military convoys, waving the nation's flag as well. No hint of real violence or any kind of unrest like that, only celebrations from the videos that we have received coming in to the programme. And while some are focused on welcoming the military takeover, others have taken aim at the deposed leader by vandalising or generally removing billboards containing Ali Bongo's image. RT's Nolavuyu Kunge and Rory Suchet talked through the background of the ousted leader earlier.
African state has been ruled by the same family for more than 55 years, and that's out of the 63 years of its independence from France in 1960. Also, just to provide some sort of context and add on to what we know, the president, Ali Bongo, is the son of Omar Bongo Ondimba, who was a president at the state for 42 years with massive French support. Ali Bongo took over his father, who died in 2009, and ever since then, he has been in power. Gabon's First Lady, right alongside Ali, whose name is Sylvia Valentine Bongo Ondimba, is a French national. Bongo's presidency has been accompanied by a lot of corruption, scandals, a lot of internationally recognized human rights violations, allegations of election fraud, and many discrepancies. It does sound like, as we've just mentioned, a country that is ran by a family, and with Ali Bongo now seeking a third term in election, as we are understanding at the moment, he might not be able to stick to power like his father did, because we are seeing the winds of political change taking place and blowing through the continent.
Nolavuyu, how can we describe the relationship between Paris and Libreville after the latter gained its independence?
Well, we already are seeing global powers like France speaking out following the events in Gabon.
France condemns the military coup taking place in Gabon, and France follows with utmost attention to the developing situation and reaffirms that the results of elections should be respected.
Once again, during this year, the action of the French diplomatic network has been marked by the response to several major crises. The situation in Sudan and the remarkable organization of the evacuation of our nationals, the coup d'etat in Niger, and now the situation in Gabon that we're following with the utmost attention.
The whole area, starting with Central African Republic, then Mali, then Burkina Faso, now Niger, maybe Gabon, it's in a very difficult situation, and certainly the ministers, today defense ministers and tomorrow foreign affairs ministers, have to have a deep thought on what is going on there and how we can improve our policy in respect to these countries. This is a big issue for Europe.
Those comments were the first reaction from France, who is also the former colonial power in Gabon, whose influence in Africa has been dubbed and has been seen as being undermining, especially following a series of recent coups that have toppled the former colonized governments and countries in Africa. And I also think that given the long-standing link between foreign powers and insecurities in Africa, one cannot ignore the involvement of both local and foreign actors in the current wave of military coups in Africa. And I think a lot of people have been saying that military coups in Africa are a continuation of politics by means, especially in West and Central Africa, where the political system favors only the political class to the detriment of the masses, and those masses who can't wean and remove themselves from these so-called political powers that we are talking about here. You'd also remember that in March this year, Emmanuel Macron's spoke on a new vision of partnership with African countries. And this new vision of partnership entailed reducing France's military presence within the African country. But despite those claims and despite those statements and despite those promises that the president put forward not so long ago, this whole matter has been dubbed as being instigated by Macron, with many African citizens saying that despite all of those claims, Emmanuel Macron is to blame for the atrocities and the failures within the African state, especially within the Western Central African region. So quite a lot will be coming from those side of the region, and quite a lot of statements and press releases are expected to come through, to filter through within the African continent, coming from the likes of France and other Western countries. At this moment, Africans are very much involved in pro-independence movements, and that is putting pressure on the colonizing powers such as France. And this is all reminding them of the promises that they had made to secure African support for the past efforts, or during the past efforts. African citizens are celebrating. It feels like they're finally getting their powers back.
Well, Moscow, meanwhile, has said it is keeping a close eye on the developing situation in Gabon.